Well, good evening, Cedar Falls, and welcome to the Standing Committee meeting of Monday, April 17th, 2023. I'll now call this meeting to order with a roll call from Madam Clerk.
Schultz.
Here.
DeBoer.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Harding.
Here.
Ganfield.
Here.
Sires.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
All members present.
Thank you. All right, we're going to start with Committee of the Whole, and we have a review of council salary, and the City Treasurer, Lisa Roding, is going to walk us through some stuff before we have our conversation.
Okay, there it is. I guess I thought it was going to be at the FBO committee, but I see it's at the Committee of the Whole, so forgive my typo on the first slide, but thank you, Councilmember Harding, and good evening. Tonight I'm going to present a review of the council salaries. This came forward from the goal-setting session last November as a recommendation from council to review. Just to give you some information, excuse me, on elected officials, council members and the mayor are considered employees of the city, so they are paid through the city's payroll system. And per Iowa Code Section 372.13.8, it is required to have an ordinance in place setting the pay for these elected officials. And in the Cedar Falls Code of Ordinances, we have Section 2-47 establishing the pay for the city council members. This was last changed in January of 1999, establishing this base salary of the $4,098.60. That was effective January 1st of 2000. And an annual salary increase equal to the latest calendar year annual federal consumer price index shall be awarded at the start of each year thereafter. The next few slides do show the history of that CPI. Here are the first 10 years, 2000 through 2009, the council salary that was established, and then the rate that was increased. Here's 2010 through 2019. And then the last 4 years. So the rate of pay established this past January is $6,982.32, and that was a 7% increase. That was the prior year consumer price index change. Just to give you an overview then of the past 24 years from 2000 to 2023, those two rates, the difference of the increase is a 70.4% increase. And then the actual CPI did change 70.1. I did survey the top 25 cities, and I received responses from 24 of them. And that actual chart was included in your packet also, giving the population and then the annual rate that each city pays their council members. So the average of those 24 cities is $9,372.60. And then if we exclude the top two metropolitan cities of Cedar Rapids and Des Moines, the average does drop to $7,902.17, and then a median is $7,864. And again, the Cedar Falls Council does receive the $6,982.32. Iowa Code does establish when the council can adopt a change in their compensation for the elected officials. This cannot be changed during the months of November and December of a regular city election year. And this is a regular city election year, 2023 is. So any change would have the 3 readings of the ordinance completed prior to the November first meeting in November. Any change that would be made would then become effective the January of '24. Staff is seeking a recommendation tonight to either keep the ordinance the same or for council to direct staff to draft an amendment to the ordinance, section 2-47.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right. I will open it up to council discussion, and if there are, well, first, let's start with any questions that we would have for Mrs. Roding, and then we can have some deliberation. So questions first. Yes, Councilmember DeBurr.
I was just curious, when you took this chart that you did of the top cities, why did you average all those together instead of just averaging the ones with similar population?
I guess I was just directed to average the top 25. Yes, it would be logical to maybe do the 5 above us and the 5 below us as an average also.
Okay, because, yeah, I just roughly penciled in the ones that were 39 to 45, and average was 69.98. And when I went out to, like 20, we were, what, 41,000, I think, for the population, or 40,000? From 20 to 60, it averaged at 63.37. So I just was curious how you picked which cities to put in your average.
Well, we base it on similar charts that might be included in the budget presentation where we show the top 25 cities on those charts, whether it's average number of employees, tax rate, and those things are covered in the budget, so we did the same.
Okay, and it didn't factor in as to whether they met once or twice a month?
No,
Or once a
no,
week or twice?
we did not. I do have information on that if you wanted any information on meetings, but, because that was part of my survey.
Yeah, because I was curious, like, which ones met more often than we do, or met less often?
I just have the city of Ames and the city of Sioux City that do meet 4 times a month, have 4 council meetings, along with some work sessions. And then a lot of them do have the regular 2 meetings and similar work sessions that we do. They do state that there are more work sessions during the budget process.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Ganfield.
Hey, Lisa, I was just wondering, the top 25 cities, by what metric? Is that by population, I'm assuming?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. And I wanted to just double check on the salary survey. You've got Davenport that's not listed there. Is that simply because they're aldermen instead of councilpersons? Or why is their number missing?
They didn't respond. 3 emails and 2 phone calls, and
Gotcha.
got no response.
I was just wondering, because I started looking into some of this previously, and I got 15 on their website. They've got 10 aldermen that run their meetings. I just wanted to make sure if it was something that was missing for a different reason than I knew. So appreciate that clarification. I don't think I have anything further right now.
All right. Other questions? Yes, Councilmember Cruz.
Thank you. In regards to Davenport, I made a call to the city clerk and spoke with them. They are aldermen, but they're the same as council members, essentially. They have 2 at-large and 8 wards in the city, and their compensation is $17,099 is what their compensation is. So I was able to get that basically 1 phone call. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay.
If I may, if anybody else has.
Go ahead.
I did send out an email regarding this and doing some analysis. If I looked at the population of the cities in Iowa, there's a significant drop-off once we get to the top, or past the top 15 in size. So thinking of the large dollars we deal with in our budgets, through the CIP alone, this year and the future 5 years, we're close to $500 million. So, as a financial analyst, I look at that and say we got a great responsibility to have good business-minded people involved with this, running the city, operating like a business. And with that, I took the top 15 cities and did an average, considering that we would be in that dollar volume of handling that money. And I got an average salary of $12,744. going further, taking out the highest compensated and the lowest compensated to get a better average of the 12 middle cities, I got, not counting Cedar Falls, I got $12,062. So, I mean, realistically, I feel comfortable asking whether it's, what do I want to say, a motion to be compensated $1,000 a month at $12,000 would be reasonable. And in some ways, I think it should be higher because of the work we have to do, the research we have to do to back up and do due diligence on projects and so on.
All right. Well, before we take a motion, if you can hold on one sec, I'd like to see if we have any more questions for Ms. Roding. Anyone have specific questions before we kind of go into it as council? All right. Well, I don't want to keep you standing there while we go back and forth. So if we have some more questions, we'll ask you back up. So thank you so much for your time and effort. All right. So we can't make a motion to do, to raise the rate here just because we have to be careful of what final action we take. But we could make a motion to direct staff to change the ordinance to a certain number and bring it back to council. So I would open it up for a motion, and then when we get a motion on the table, we can talk about the merits of the number or the dollar amount, but it would seem wise to start with a motion. So I'm opening that up.
So you want a motion then to staff to look at increasing our salary?
To change the ordinance.
Change the ordinance?
Yep.
Okay.
To what dollar amount?
I would start with discussion of $1,000 a month.
All right. Is there a second for that?
Second.
All right. We're opened up at looking to change the salary to roughly, exactly $12,000 a year gross for each council member. So I'll open up for them. I guess I'll say something really quick, and then I'll open it up for others. I am obviously stated through the media, and if you haven't read it, then now you know that I'm not running again. But I support more money for council members in the future. I think that I don't know the exact number, but I think it should be around that $12,000 mark for sure. It's a lot of work to really put in the right amount of time, and to all the meetings you have to do, all of the extra meetings, goal setting, committees, regular meetings, meetings with citizens, phone calls, time you leave work, committees. What did we just do, Kelly?
Condemnation.
Condemnation committee. I've been on 2 of those interviews for commissions. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours a year. I've taken a lot of time off work, and in fact, the big reason why I'm not running is because I just don't feel that I can actually commit the time to do my best for the next cycle. So I would rather someone who feels like they have that time. So at this moment, I definitely support raising that bar so we can have solid candidates. All right, I'll open it up for others who think differently or similarly. Yes, Councilmember Schultz.
Well, I have some of the similar sentiments that I was at the last condemnation. I'm in a position of being retired. I'll say that. I do have jobs that I work, but I think it's important that we have representation across the city from people that aren't motivated by the salary necessarily, but it is important because there's people on this council that do take time off from work to get this job done, and that's important. But I don't want it to turn into a point of being motivated by, oh, look, I could make another whatever amount, and whatever you get paid. I know there's some people that just turn around and donate that back to certain causes, which was great too. So I don't believe that we're going to put this at a price where we're going to get 8 bankers or 8 attorneys in this, position. But I think it's important that people are given a stipend. It's not considered really a salary, but it's important to have a stipend to compensate for those hours, which they are a lot. And I would like to talk you back into staying around, Simon. I think you do a great job. But It's important to get compensated because that's what time is all about. But I could find some interest in Mr. Cruz's proposal too for those reasons.
Councilman Harding?
Yes, Councilmember Dunn.
Okay, so this is something that I toy around with because, first of all, I would like to put to bed, well, I guess everybody can have their own thoughts, but my thoughts is I can think of a lot more jobs. If I was looking to make a little extra cash, I can think of about 50 jobs I would rather do. I mean, this job is not, when you pencil out all the time, you're not making big bank. I mean, I could go bartend and make better bank for less time and less stress. So let's just, I think we can put that to bed. Nobody's jumping into this for the money. My concern as a human and as a citizen is I never want to prevent anybody from being able to do this job. And, you know, I'm lucky enough to have paid time off, but I know that there's just different lives. You know, maybe you're self-employed or whatever. I don't ever want to have somebody that's like, you know what, I would love to run and serve my city, but I can't because financially it would put me in a bad position. So that's my concern, is that we never put a human, a person who wants to serve their community in a position where they cannot do it. You know, I think we were all, most people don't even know you get paid anything. I mean, when they sit you down and you're like, oh, you get something. But then in the end, you kind of understand where, yeah, you got to take some time off. And I don't know, like maybe if you're like me, I mean, when I was nursing, it's like not like I had all kinds of, not that I'm dressing to the nines, but I mean, there's just different expenses like that people deserve. And it is a stipend, technically, I believe. But that's my concern, is that we have a place where all citizens are able to serve if they wish. And I do not think, while we, you know, I even in my own head am thinking, I don't want somebody to do this just for the money. And then I think, wait a minute, I wouldn't do this for the money. I mean, you're doing this to serve your city. So there's my 2 cents.
True. And at $12,000, I mean, it's nothing to throw. You know, $12,000 is $12,000, but after taxes and what you're getting, it's hardly viable to live off of. So it's not, like you said, it's not going out there and saying, oh, I can make an extra 40 grand off this job or whatnot. Are there people, or are there council members that are opposed to this, that raising it at all, or want to see it lower? And yes, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, if you would like to speak on it.
I guess I've done this, for 20 years. I guess when I went on, it looks like I earned $4,400, and now it's at $6,982. So that's quite an increase over 20 years. When I did this, I did not know there was any pay. I was surprised after I got elected to find out that there was a stipend or a payment, because I always considered it volunteer work and work to serve my community. When you compare it with, like I said, the average populations on the chart that we were given, our pay is $69.82, and the average was $69.98 for our comparable cities. So I don't think we're out of line with the ordinance, the way it was written, and how it's been raised with the price index. So I don't see a need. I've always had, 2 jobs the entire time, plus working on console, and so my employment never interfered with my serving the community. So I just don't see that as a good argument.
I would say my employment doesn't interfere with me serving the community, but me serving the community interferes with my employment. And the fact that I've had 2 different jobs, one working for someone and one working for myself, and having to take the time off during the day to do a lot of meetings, I would have to either make up that time or not get paid for that time. So for me, it definitely directly impacted the amount of money I made at my job. There were multiple days where we did interviews for public safety director. I was trying to think of it. And we actually spent all day doing that, and I took an unpaid day off to do that. So I didn't mind doing that because I wanted to. But I'm with Kelly when there are some people that they have to take that time off and they may not get paid, and I would want to make sure that we wouldn't rule them out from serving on council So that's my, as far as firsthand experience, it definitely has affected my job.
Chairman?
Yes, Councilmember Schultz.
I do have a question for Lori. If we change the ordinance to that 1,000 a month, does that continue to follow the CPI, or is it there until we would rechange the ordinance again?
I guess that would be the other direction. I mean, are you revamping that whole section or just interjecting a new salary, maybe Ron or?
I think that was going to be, I think there's 2 points of clarification on the motion. The first one is it the council's wish to keep going with the CPI? I would recommend that's kept in there. It was 23 years since we've had to adjust the ordinance until now, and so that would probably keep it on par moving forward. And then the other point of clarification is what would be the beginning date? Is that looking at January 1 of 2024 or January 1 of 2025, or what is that? So I think those are a couple of points of clarification that the council would need to make.
Just a quick question on that. Wouldn't it have to be July of next year because of the budget? Because we're setting the budget till next July. Otherwise, they'd have to alter the budget that's later tonight.
True, or we would have to do something through a budget amendment this next year. But you're right, if it started January 1, there would be half a year that we don't have accounted for in our budget right now. So I think that's kind of back to Ron's point. You could always make it effective a different date. January 1 of 2024 is just the earliest it could be.
I'm not sure about that. I'm reading the Iowa Code, and it says a change in compensation for council members becomes effective the beginning of the term the council members are elected at an election following. So I think it has to become effective next January per Iowa Code. But
I agree, beginning of the term.
yeah.
So I have a point of clarification. Would that, or a question rather, would that be for each council member? It would take effect for every single council member after, or just after their next election since we're split?
Good question. So the effective date is the beginning of the term of those elected during the next council election, and the code is clear. It applies to all council members at that point.
Okay, so if we voted to go forward with something, then it would be, we would have to make it take effect by state law on the 1st of next January 1st, 2024. Or could we make it take effect after the following election, or can we not go that far in advance?
I think a strict interpretation would be that it would have to take effect January 1, 24.
Okay.
Of course, the option for council, if they want to make it later, is to wait to take action on it.
Okay, fair. So those are the thoughts. Yes, Councilmember Cruz.
Be a question for Mr. Rogers or someone. So we're making a motion to change the ordinance, but do we pick a number now, or would that be part of the deliberation so we get citizens' feedback? Because some of them, and I had people say to me that we should be getting closer to the $1,500 a month. And I put that in my email to the rest of the council and staff that, where's a equitable amount of money? I would like to hear from the citizens to say, do they think $1,000 a month or $1,500 a month, which would be best? We don't have feedback here because, so is that a way to do that? Or do we just pick a number and then the first reading? Or what's the next step if we say we want an increase?
So staff needs direction to come back with an ordinance change, specific language change for council to consider. Because it's an ordinance, there'll be 3 readings, public comment at every reading,
Right.
and there could be amendments made after that.
So we would give you a dollar number ultimately tonight.
We did.
That would be the staff's preference.
Right now it's $1,000 a month, which I would prefer to say $12,000 yearly, rather than. I don't know. Is there a preference on whether the words would be monthly or
Well,
yearly?
I think if you look at page 5 of the presentation, and it's section 2-47 in there. The simple version would be just to change out the annual salary of 12,000, and after that, the date.
That's
So
okay.
it would simply, the ordinance change would be those two items.
All right. Well, I want to pause, and since we're in a motion, I want to see if there's anyone from the public that would wish to speak on this item before we continue on talking about where we're at. So, is anyone from the public wish to come forward? All right. Seeing none, let's continue
Mr.
on.
Chairman?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Cyrus.
I'm honored to serve the citizens of this great community. I love Cedar Falls. I fight hard to keep our costs down, and council salary is just another thing where we can look and serve our community, and I'd be opposed to a raise. I don't think that's the right thing to do. It's just, we've got to save all around, and to vote a raise, I just think is wrong. You wanted opinions on the other side, that's it. I do donate all my salary around here in the Cedar Valley. I've been criticized for that, but that's the way I feel, and it's a great honor and privilege to serve the citizens of this community. I'm opposed to having a increase, so that's all.
No problem. I respect that opinion. I can see the opinion of that, but I do think it limits the potential for all candidates or all people to be able to serve that aren't in a position to be able to donate. And by the way, I don't criticize you for donating. I thank you for donating. So thank you, Councilmember Cyrus, for donating. Other thoughts before we just go ahead and vote on this motion, because I think we're coming to a point where we can see what we're doing. Yes, Councilmember DeBurr first, and then Councilmember Cruz.
I just wanted to point out, if you guys take out the consumer price index, like the way Ron had said, and you just make it a dollar amount, you'll have to, anytime you want that raised again, it will have to go through a process like this up for public opinion. Where the way they did it back when they did it in 2000 by doing the CPI, it was an automatic increase based off the CPI.
I think we were talking about leaving the CPI in and
I
just
thought he just
changing
mentioned making
changing
it
the dollar
12,000.
amount.
Yeah, I think if you look on that section 2-47, what I was saying is just change the dollar amount to whatever the council is looking at, and then also change the date. It also keeps the CPI in there.
So you're actually giving an increase more than 12,000. You're doing 12,000 plus CPI every year.
That's what it would be, yes.
Yeah.
Councilmember Cruz.
Thank you. To that point about the CPI, in my discussion with the Davenport City Clerk, they did mention that the $17,099 that they were getting paid was a recent increase based on consumer price index. And I know that you can just look at these numbers, and with odd dollar amounts, it's telling you that they're doing a CPI adjustment. And I know some of these other ones are doing so. You know, you'd pick a city that has a flat 6,000 or 10,000. They are probably, either they just changed it with the recent survey, or they don't have a CPI. But then you got to reconvene the council to decide maybe each year. Maybe they do that. I don't know. So, but I'd be in favor of keeping the CPI. None of our costs are going down unless we have a major recession, which they happen. But I think it's fair to at least go at the 12,000 total for the year. And I'd be very interested in feedback from the community, which would be the first reading, to see if that's enough. Or people like some of us here don't think it's enough, or too much, excuse me.
Fair enough. All right.
Okay.
I would guess we can come to a vote now. So we have on the table a motion to change the ordinance to $12,000 annually, change the date to January 1st, 2024.
It would go effective 2024, but the adjustment in CPI wouldn't be until 2025.
Okay, correct. So the adjustment in CPI would start in 2025, and we keep that. So any questions on what we're voting on? Did you have something, Kevin?
Did you say July 1 or January 1?
January.
Okay.
If I said July, I meant January. So,
one quick comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me grab this quick. It's saying that the CPI index adjustment is awarded at the start of each fiscal year. So it wouldn't, to the point of when does the adjustment take place, it would be then the next July 1st.
Could we put the slide up real quick?
Term of the
we're-
council members.
so I can see it. Thank you. Oh, salary.
Like the third annual federal awarded at the start of each fiscal year.
So
Not sure why that wording's in there, but I can tell you historically, we've always done it. We've taken last calendar year, and
Okay.
then that's what's applied for
So-
the next January. So it is actually kind of lags behind.
So should
actually.
we
I think we should clarify the
clean-
language
clean
too.
that language up
Yep,
as well?
I think we should, while we're bringing that back. I think that'd be a good idea.
So we could be a little more broad and say adjust the salary to $12,000 annually, and then allow staff to clarify the language about the CPI.
Yep, I think that's fair.
All right, is that fair? All right, that's the motion on the table. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Hey,
All right, passes 5-2, so we'll be able to get that ordinance come back before council. All right, we will move on now to Community Development Committee, and the first thing we have to talk about is the downtown public restroom study, and we will have Director Stephanie Sheets for a presentation.
All right, good evening. I'm a lot shorter than Lisa.
Good evening.
All right, here to talk about restrooms. So just a little bit of background. It was back in July of 2022 when this item was referred to discuss whether a study was needed. Hopefully the information tonight will help with a decision about whether to do a study or whether there's enough information or just a little bit more needed in a certain area or that type of thing. It was not identified as a priority and goal setting, so it hasn't made it on the CIP or anything further as an individual project at this point. But nonetheless, we've had multiple comments at public forum, as the council's aware, from an individual, and so we're here to talk about it. This is a list of the topics that I plan to go through briefly tonight. Talk a little bit about public restroom availability downtown, what the private restroom requirements are, what accessibility requirements are, because that's kind of mingled into this conversation a little bit. Some ideas on some potential upgrades if the council's interested in talking about that and thinking about it, as well as a variety of other ideas that might be of merit. So hopefully all this information will be useful in discussion by the council. So one is a map of just, we put together just a quick map that looks at what is the public restroom availability. And it does vary about what's available when, and there isn't a whole lot that is always open. Many of them are open during business hours or during the summer because then we have to turn off the water or something like that because it needs to be winterized. And you see that none of them are in kind of the core downtown area. You know, location is something that we'll end up talking about a little bit more as well. In terms of building code requirements for private restroom requirements, bathrooms are required for all buildings. The use is what drives how many bathrooms need to be provided, and there's a whole calculation, lots of details about that and what you need for number of sinks and all of that. I'm not prepared to get into that information, but just generally know that the capacity and the use drive the number of bathrooms required. And so there are exceptions when you have a low, what we call occupant load, if you only have a couple people in there, and that's kind of driven by the use type and, you know, if it's retail and you're going to have a lot of display area, you might have lower occupancy than a restaurant, for example, with seating. But the owner or the business is required to have restrooms available to their customers in most cases. There are always exceptions to everything, and for example, the exception might be that a delivery or kind of a takeout obviously wouldn't be required to have a public restroom. But most businesses need to have that available for their customers. Also, in terms of what's required accessibility-wise, the building code regulates what's called the effort to open the door. So while we might commonly consider that to be the weight of the door, it's not necessarily the weight of the door on a scale type of thing. It's what type of force does it take to open it. And there's a lot of details about that, but it's a common regulation. The building code does not regulate the closing time of the door. There actually is no requirement that it has to close on its own. And so we would generally say that the best practice is a self-closing door, and that's what you probably commonly see with a lot of restrooms, is that the door kind of closes on its own. And the timing of that is not regulated. If it's a fire-rated door, then there is some regulation about it, but many bathroom doors are not fire-regulated. So again, there's all kinds of different ways this could be looked at and questions that could come up. If we wanted to look at, for example, the library, due to their hours of operation, they're kind of open the longest, open on weekends. If we want to talk about that being a little bit more available and easy to get in and out of, then one idea is talking about adding the push button, which is not a requirement for a restroom door. You see that on many building entrances being a requirement to have the push button for ADA accessibility. It is not a bathroom requirement, but that's something that could be looked at, adding that to the main bathrooms on the first floor, for example, in both the women's and the men's, which would be a total cost of approximately $7,000 to do that. You could make it easier on the second floor. Maybe we just take off self-closing hardware and just add a sign that please be courteous and close the door. I mean, we recommend best practice on the closing for the privacy of it, the privacy for the noise, as well as any visibility privacy as well. So those are a couple ideas if we wanted to think about some bathrooms that we already have. There are a variety of other ideas that could come into play that the council might wish to discuss. You could install permanent standalone restroom facility. We could think about to the future with the parking ramp, which I think is an idea that some people have floated. We could look at temporary bathrooms to deal with right now. Do we think there's a need? We could also deal with the right now in a public-private partnership, and that could be ongoing. So I'm going to talk about some of those options. First, if we look at a standalone facility, we have a couple examples that we can draw from. Our Public Works Parks folks have installed a couple bathrooms recently. So we have an example in Nordic Park of one that was just one unit there available, and it was built at $25,000. We inflated to estimate today we inflated about 25%, estimating about $31,000 to do that type of unit today. Now, I will say that neither one of these today costs listed on this slide include the cost of water or sewer. That is excluded right now from the price you see there, because that's going to vary depending on the location. How long is that private line that has to be installed in order to service wherever that building might be located? And it also will vary how much pavement it might impact. If we're going to do it in a parking lot and use some parking stalls, which side and where is the current line that we're using, pavement in the road in order to connect to public facilities, that type of thing. So this is really only the unit itself and providing that. It is not if we're going to heat the building. It's not if we're going to have weatherized pipes so that we can have it on all year and not have to shut down the bathroom in the winter. So this is really just probably the starting point of the expenses. If we know a location, then we can get more exact about what the cost might be and the interest about the type of facility to provide. The Place to Play Park was slightly more because it has 2 stalls there, so that increases the price. And I thought that one might be a good one just to take a look at what does it mean if we wanted to put something in, for example, a parking lot downtown. Do we feel that we might want to utilize some of that space to provide something like this? And so I just put a graphic on here. You see in the blue rectangle would be the building itself up at the corner of the parking lot there. And then next to that, the orange rectangle would be kind of the clear zone of the door a 3-foot door that's about a 5-foot clear zone. So it shows that it takes up, a parking stall is typically 18 feet long and 9 feet wide. So that's how we kind of come to these dimensions. Now, we could lay this out in a number of different configurations and have less impact, but one thing that we do need to think about is we don't want to see those doors or the people having to line up or be in the line of traffic. And you can see there's circulation there. There's a 24-foot drive aisle for two-way traffic in that particular parking lot, and we want to make sure that people are safe. So maybe we flip the building and they access from the sidewalk or something like that, but again, it's just an example. Temporary bathrooms, we could do a trailer type of option. We could do just a standard kind of porta potty that's more of an ADA compliant type of one. We need to determine what is the time of year that we want to provide that. Is it just kind of in the May to October timeframe? Is it all year? That type of thing. The price will then vary there. I was able to get a price on the ADA compliant portable restroom. I was not able to get a price on the trailer after multiple contacts. We also have the option of public-private partnership, and this information is courtesy of Community Main Street that was trying to be proactive and reached out to a downtown property owner to find out if there might be interest in doing something like this, and had permission to share the costs that were estimated to do so. So these are options that can range from about $33,000 to maybe $60,000 a year if we wanted to do a public-private partnership. We also would need to talk about potential locations, and there are a variety of options there. One might be, show black dots here. If you can see those on the screen, the black dots are our city parking lots, and we could certainly choose to locate something in a city parking lot. It would detract in the number of downtown parking spaces we have available, which we know is a constant source of concern, so that may not be a great option. We're always going to have the concern about, is that location, is there room at that location? Is it convenient enough? Is it customer friendly? That type of thing. That will be a constant question that we'll have. Another option would be then green dots just got added to the slide, which are city spaces. Is there any kind of green, kind of open space where we might be able to kind of stick something in, for lack of a better word? And there aren't a lot of options that way either that I could see in just doing a quick survey of what might be available. And then last, the other option might be, well, would there be a private property that we might be able to partner with or purchase a part of or something like that in order to provide a restroom facility? And these are just examples. I'm sure there are many others, but I just kind of quickly, what sites maybe have a little bit of space that might realistically be something to put on here. I've not talked with any property owners. I don't want to surprise them by thinking, oh, there's going to be a restroom on their property. This was just kind of doing a little bit of a quick inventory of what might be available and didn't have a building on it, for example. So many different options, each have their positives and their negatives, and we can see that we can talk a lot about location. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about some of the additional costs that could come with providing a public restroom, and we have seen a fair amount of vandalism happening to our property, and in particular our restrooms in our parks. So we would need to be prepared for not only the building cost itself if we went with a standalone facility, but the staff cost that's going to come with that. Constant and frequent monitoring would be needed, and that I'm sure that factored into that public-private partnership proposal that I flashed up here. It is not cheap to provide this because you need to clean the facility. People expect a nice facility they want to go to, but there are many people that don't respect that, and there's a lot of work that has to happen to keep that in good condition and in working order. So restroom cleaning and maintenance for our Public Works crews in 2022, Public Works estimated that at about 700 hours of our staff time toward restrooms. And vandalism, while we haven't tracked that by itself, we estimate that in 2022 we spent about 35 to 40% of our time on vandalism. These images don't really convey the scope of the work that it takes to clean up something. There are items that are smeared on the wall. We have to repaint and clean. Cheese on the toilet that's shown here, it's not just a simple pickup. It's melted, it's yucky. I wouldn't want to touch it. We've had fires. They take 3 days to clean up. So a lot of vandalism that occurs. So with that, I'll leave it for council discussion or any direction about additional information you feel you might need.
All right. Thank you so much. I'll open it up for council. Yes, Councilmember Cruz first.
Okay. Can you give a rough idea of the 700 hours of staff time? Are we billing that at $30 an hour? I mean, that's 21 grand right there.
It probably depends on the staff that's involved in doing the cleanup because we do have various rates, but I don't know if Director Schrage has anything more to add.
No, it would
Summer part-time help would be
correct.
one wage, but it's not a small number. I mean, I just did $30 an hour average, let's say that's 21 grand. And that's if there's no significant damage. I mean, the vandalism thing, I travel across the country a lot and I stop at rest stops along the freeways, and virtually every mirror, every toilet seat, every wall has got etchings in the wall, in the mirror. You would think stainless steel walls would be safe from etching, but if you look at those, there's all sorts of, graffiti and damage. But I certainly see this would be nice to have, but because of the cost, I'm kind of leery. One thing I wanted to ask someone on staff, do we have any directional signs to our current bathrooms?
I don't believe we have any physical directional signs up.
Hands?
Yeah.
Restroom?
No, I don't believe we have any, but we have talked about, we have maps about parking, like we could add that, and we've
QR
talked
code?
about having a QR code added to some maps. We could easily add the bathroom availability to that. That's a pretty low-hanging fruit.
I think that would be very helpful to point out the existing bathrooms. With the QR code, the future parking ramp, I could see that would be a consideration. But, when you bring up the idea of a sewer line being added to it, as opposed to, I guess, what they're called in the parks where they're holding tanks, there's probably a name for those type of bathroom facilities, which aren't really,
we refer to them as drop toilets, but generally that's in a location where sanitary sewer isn't available.
Okay. So my thoughts are to go with the QR code, educate the public where they are. And speaking with a number of the merchants, they didn't seem to have a concern if random people come in to use their facilities. Now that's case by case on which merchants you're talking to and what type of, whether they're a bar, restaurant, or retail. But the ones I talked to, they said, we're doing business. People are downtown to do something. They're going to an establishment. They use their facilities. So that's how I would view it. So those are my thoughts so far.
Councilmember Schultz, next.
Yeah, I'll take off where Mr. Cruz left that. Speaking to merchants, and I know you attend the Community Main Street, just doing a walking survey, I asked kind of that same question, would they turn someone away? And everyone was more than amicable to say no, not even if they're not in here buying something. I would say that if you got a phone number for the wheelchair accessible restroom trailer, give it to Mr. Cruz, because he's got better luck at getting people to answer a phone apparently, so you can see what he gets from that. But is there a consideration to, and maybe it would do something with the vandalism, to have a pay toilet or, some sort of requirement to access it, to identify who's going into that, to help figure out some of this tracking. I thought those were Post-it notes. I never would have guessed that was cheese. Pretty disgusting, so. But all due respect to Mrs. Beach, I appreciate seeing her here, and I appreciate her concern for our community, and I want her to know that we take what she has to, her comments very seriously, and this is an example of one of those, so.
Councilmember DeBurr.
Just a quick question. On the page 2, the map of public restrooms, there was 2 of them that are green that are only open during events. One is in the Overman Park, and I'm not sure the other one, what the name of that building is. But was there any discussion about having those open during the day instead of only during events?
Yeah, so the two green ones are, like you said, there's one at Overman Park and the other was off the plaza there, which there's a requirement in that agreement that it needs to be open during public events. I believe we've talked with the band shell folks before, and of course they'd like to, during event they're able to monitor it. I'm guessing that that's the huge advantage to them. So we would have to talk with them more about having it open all the time and whether they'd be open to that. They're responsible for maintaining it.
Okay. But the one in the plaza is not, it's only during events, so it can't
Correct.
be used during the day. Just on a
Correct.
regular, even though there's businesses open around it to monitor.
Correct.
Councilman Harding?
Council.
But the part of the quote was that bathroom, right?
Correct.
At the plaza? So it
Yes.
could be just for
Yeah.
$60,000 a year.
Correct.
Okay. I do appreciate all the work that's been done. I do appreciate I worked long-term care for a long time before I did do whatever I do now. So I can appreciate, and even as a young, like a mother who has, your hands full and pushing a stroller and all the things, I appreciate accessibility for all. But I also know this is a group that's trying to, we're working on our budget right now. So if that doesn't speak to something, I don't know what does. The one part where you mentioned in the library about, possibly, we could have some like signage and things like that to make people know that there is an available restroom there. I just think about like when I go to Galena, for instance, like they do have a restroom, but it's in their old depot. And coincidentally, even though I thought it was open all the time, it's not open all the time. It's only open when the visitors, folks are there to monitor it. And I assume that's probably why. So I'm thinking like, would that be a possibility for this group of thinking that we would support, I think it was the $7,000 if we wanted to do the push buttons. I mean, that would be a somewhat, $7,000 is still $7,000 and we'd have to, but we could make it so people know that those bathrooms are available for use, which if you're not from our community, you may not know that.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Ganfield.
I'm inclined to agree with Kelly, the same idea there. I think the biggest bang for our buck in the immediate short term is that we utilize the spaces that are already monitored and already open. Stephanie, is the library open more than the community center or vice versa? Or are they equal?
I believe the library, because I don't know, the community center might have rentals and things like that, but it's mostly during the day they're open unless they have an evening rental. So the library is probably more dependable at this point.
Gotcha. Okay, and I tend to agree with that. I would be inclined to put the ADA accessibility doors in both, but I think if we preferentially at least do it in the library, add with it the publication on the QR and the parking map so that folks that are walking up and down Main Street, maybe even they go to a place and they scan a QR code to find out, hey, where's the closest restroom? Then they can get over there and utilize it. The pain point that we're trying to address here is people getting stuck in a door and needing to be able to use facilities. And to Mrs. Beach's point, we're better than that. So I think I'd like to recommend or make a motion that this body recommends that staff add the ADA accessibility doors in the library and get that QR code stuff published ASAP.
I'd second that.
Mr. Chairman.
All right. We're in the motion, but before you can have freedom to speak because you wanted to speak before anything else. Go ahead.
I'd like to ask Rosemary what she would be acceptable with and what she thinks is a good idea. I would think so, yes.
I was going to ask her to speak as well. So since we're in a motion, yes, come on up.
Thank you, Stephanie. I know I put you up to a lot of trouble. However, I have a husband that's 97 come this year. I am going to be 89 this year. None of you are those ages. You will find out this is the silliest conversation you're ever going to have of what you need when you are that age. We live in a community that is full of old people. We bring them here. We build houses for them. We tell them we have stuff on sale for them. We have a whole store of stuff. And if you can't take care of those people, you're not addressing what you're about. I have watched my husband try to get in to a door in a restaurant. They are heavy. They have big hinges that keep you from getting in. In fact, he has offered to come and show you. I haven't brought him for show and tell yet, but I may. He has a walker out in front from the VA. He has to reach over that to get to a door handle because there's nobody who's got push buttons in restaurants. Give me a break. They aren't anywhere. We aren't putting those on. And they're unfindable if you can't find them even. Okay, got to get that in. Then it opens so far, you've got to push a walker, you've got to walk behind it, you get caught on the back going in. If the restaurant or if wherever has enough places for that kind of happening is few and far between. There's no room in there. There's not enough to accommodate it. We didn't know we were going to have walkers and old people. So, okay, now he's in. The last restaurant we were in, we have gone often, and they know because he wants to be on his own, he always has been, that if he gets in it, he can't get out of it because he can't push the door open. So what did the owner do? The owner stands, and this is a nice thing to do. They know he's going to have trouble, and they stand there and wait until they yell through the door, "Are you coming out?" And sure enough, they're helped with the door, and Bob can get out. That is disgusting if you're in that stage. It does not make you happy. It does not make the people with you happy because of what you're putting them through. It is a ridiculous thing. I didn't expect to be free, to ask for anything free, but there are ways you can do this. If I go out this door to your two restrooms, they're perfect. Have any of you been in those restrooms out here? You just take that unit, pick it up, and go put it out on the street. You have room for everybody. You have any kind of people going in. Did you expect that you'd have anything? You put anything up in any town and you wouldn't have vandalism? Give me a break. The one kid one year threw stones out at the park, out at whichever park, threw it in the stainless steel stool forever until they caught him. Why? Why did he throw rocks in it? I don't know. You're going to have vandalism anywhere you put anything. That's just the nature of the beast. And you have to be prepared to do that. If you put a unit like out here, and if you haven't been in these bathrooms for some reason, you got it made, people. You can get in, you can get it out. Your business people, you're fine. You have all the energy in the world. You don't have legs that don't stand up. So I'm saying this is still important. We have a whole community of elderly people who need to get out of stores and restaurants and businesses and not feel like they are being an interference. They're welcomed. I can't ask about money. I can't, nothing's cheap, but you're not going to get a parking ramp for a while, so don't give me that story. You need a unit if you want to put it down, and I don't know that Community Main Street wants it by the little building. You could put it there. You need two separate. You need two. You just take this one, measure it off, pick it up, and carry it down there. It'll fit on one side of that building. And you accommodate everybody. They're his, hers places.
30 seconds.
And if they're nice enough to go in, people will use them. And for the bathrooms, the restrooms you have during the winter season are nil and none and far between. But this is a lovely bathrooms. I comment, all you people get to use this one. I know there's another one somewhere in this building. But if I'm adamant about it, I only have this one chance to say it. I was not told this was going to happen this evening, so I don't have a prepared speech for you. I didn't know you were doing this till I called the city and said, oh, what are the guys going to do down here tonight? Oh, we're going to discuss restrooms. I had no idea that this would be talked about tonight. So I hopped in my car, and here I am. And I'm, I've said everything I can say. And mostly you don't know what you're going to get until you get here. I didn't have a clue. And now I do. And surely you have aunts and uncles and grandfathers and grandmothers who need high stools, who need all of that to be comfortable.
Your time is up.
I'm sure it's way up.
If you have any final
I just
comments.
say I wish that you would think about where you're going to be in a few years and have those already in place before you get there and are doing this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
could you give us a certain location in the center of Main Street or anything else? Would you like it at one end or the other? Is the library okay, or?
They're not going to open their front all night for $40 because you have to go through the library. You can't shut the books off. That would be one destruction. That would be a hurdle to do it. There is no place underneath the band shed. That's not really handicap accessible. It amazes me how many places you people haven't been in that you don't know what I'm talking about. But no, I truly would attach it to the community center, or the community Main Street. And they've got green space down there. You've got water, you've got all that stuff there. Where the place has been beautiful is where the place we always thought we had a bathroom and we discovered it wasn't a public bathroom. Everybody used it.
Thank you.
So we need to move along, not to say, no, not you. I'm talking about us. You can take your time. Thank you for speaking. We appreciate it.
I hope you never have to do this. Not my idea of fun.
So,
Councilman Harding?
Yes.
Okay, I want to say, because with all due respect, and I do respect what you're saying, Rosemary, but I do understand what you're saying. It's not that I don't understand what you're saying. I want to make it clear, though, that are we going to spend $30,000 to $60,000 on this? I'm not. I'm just rhetorically asking that. That it ultimately is about a fair amount of money with a council who has been wanting to get down to a 0% tax increase. So I thank you, and I am listening. I don't want it to ever seem like I'm not listening. There are certain times when the mayor's speaking where he doesn't, it's the chair or the mayor's meeting, so I never want to disrespect them, but I do hear you. But ultimately, it's about this body making the decision of, A, we want to spend that kind of money for something, and I'm not saying I don't want to, but given the conversations of budget, I'm thinking that's probably not going to happen, at least this year. And also, I think if I'm hearing correctly, a lot of the concerns are with the private businesses, which we can't, if they're ADA compliant, I'm asking this, if they're ADA compliant, what control do we have over that?
None. They have to meet the building code, and they do, because there's no restriction
I just
about
want to
that
make
right
it,
now.
because I feel like sometimes, I'm not trying to be disrespectful at all, but let's just call it what it is. Are we going to spend that kind of money? Or what can we do to help maybe make some headway, I guess? So I just want to say that.
I want to jump on and have the library has a push button to enter into the library, correct? We have the buttons that you can go in to enter, so we could get in that way. And then the library's open pretty late.
It depends on the day. It's a little variable, but
Do you have the times?
I don't have it offhand.
I do.
Monday through Wednesday, 10 a.m. to 9 p.m., Thursday and Friday until 6 p.m., and Saturday and Sunday till 5.
Okay. So we have that, and then if we put buttons on the doors there, you could have button access there. But I'm open to starting with that, because that's the motion on the table, 100%. If this body wants to talk about building a facility, a bathroom facility down where Ms. Beach had mentioned at the community Main Street site, I don't know how possible that is based off who owns the land and stuff. So, but that could be referred to be looked into as an issue. So at this point in time, just due to the meeting, I want to take a vote on this, and then if there is a will to look at building the facility, then that would need to be a referral by another council member at another point in time. Yes.
Another
Councilmember Cruz.
comment or question potentially.
Sure.
I'll call it the plaza toilet, if that's the name we seem to be using for it. The TIF money that's generated through that, why wouldn't that finance in some part maintaining it during the prime parts of the day, that it's not during an event?
Well, we currently have an agreement with the developer about what the increased value that's being paid to the developer for the cost of doing the development overall. And that was just extended to cover some of those costs. And it did not include anything outside of having the bathroom available during public events. That was specific, that we wanted to at least have it open for public events.
Chairman?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Schultz.
That kind of follows along with the question I was going to ask regarding TIF funds. And maybe a question for Jennifer, on the availability of monies from the TIF to build, for example, a facility at the location down by Community Main Street, particularly across the street where it's our property.
So currently in the downtown TIF, we've primarily used funds down there for infrastructure, with a streetscape, all of those. Pretty rare we've used them for ongoing operating costs. In fact, I'm trying to think of any one that we've done. So we have not done that up to this point. But, yes, there's TIF increment that could be available to do that. Just keep in mind, this council's already committed, I want to say 7 years down the road, maybe, that it'll still take for that downtown TIF to already pay for what we already have for expenses down there. So I'm only just saying that it's a TIF without expiration, but it means you extend that TIF, and you'll continue to do that if you have more costs you're adding to it.
So I know that's discussions that we're going to continue to have regarding TIFs, but so we have commitments, you're saying, for 7 years out on money we've already spent that we need to collect out of that TIF to pay for those things that we've done, and 70 grand would add even more to that.
Do you have something, Councilmember DeBurr?
But only when you were getting back to your motion.
Okay, so let's go back to the motion at hand, which is to talk about
The push button.
the push buttons inside the library
And
bathrooms.
is that 7,000 for the men's and 7, or is that the combined total for the two?
It's a combined total for the two on the first floor only.
Okay, and we're not going to discuss the closing hardware yet, correct?
It was not included in the motion, but you could.
No, I don't want to
You don't want
include that at this time, because I'm not sure that that's a good move.
I think if we have the push button, the push button opens it from the inside and the outside, correct?
Correct.
So that therefore we wouldn't have to worry
I think
about
what you
taking
might
the
be
hardware
referring
off.
to is the slide said, like on the second floor, for example, and at the community center, we could potentially just remove the self-closing hardware, so that you just open it, but you have to make sure that you close it.
I
Yeah.
probably wouldn't recommend doing
No,
that personally.
Yeah, I know when I had my 3-foot surgeries and I was on an E-card, it's pretty hard to close behind you.
Yeah.
Where if it's self-closing, that sometimes is better.
Okay, so do we have enough information to vote on this particular motion?
Yeah.
And then
Yes.
And just to clarify, first floor only.
first floor only, yes. ADA buttons on the first floor only, bathroom in the library.
And some
And some
information
signs
to make
and
sure
QR
people know it's
codes,
there.
yes.
Those
To
QR
start,
codes.
yes.
QR codes.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. All in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Now, I don't want the discussion to be done because it looks like there was some interest in continuing on, but for tonight, for time's sake, we're going to, I don't feel like we have enough information and time to divulge into that. So I would allow that to be a council referral in the future to talk about where we could place something that Ms. Beach was referring to. I certainly hope we continue this conversation. We have one more item on our agenda, the Iowa Workforce Housing Tax Credit, and we will go as efficiently as possible.
All righty. Good evening again.
Thank you.
So you have information in your packet materials, a cover memo that notes the reason we're bringing this forward tonight is after we've heard from several different developers that they may make application to this program. So we wanted to give council an overview, some general information about the state program. This is highlights that I thought would be helpful for the council to know, taken from a more in-depth presentation that the state did that is available online, and I can always send that link to you if you would like that. But the highlights that I thought would be helpful to cover for the council for general awareness is to know that the applications for this program are due on June 9th of 2023, and there's 35 million total that is available, and that is split 50-50 between small and urban areas, and we are considered an urban area. It is a very competitive grant application. Last year, there were 133 applications and 57 were awarded. The eligible project sites, these are kind of 4 different types of eligible areas under this program. It can be housing development that's located on a brownfield or a gray field. It can be repair or rehabilitation of a dilapidated housing or housing units, I should say. Upper story housing development can qualify for this if it's in an existing multi-use building. And then for small cities only, new construction in a green field is an eligible site. There are some program requirements that I thought it would be helpful for the council to know. There is local action that is required and needs to be part of the application. A resolution of support from the city is required for any application that is submitted, and also a local match is required at a minimum of $1,000 per unit. These applications are scored with points, so I couldn't tell you offhand what the points are and how they score that, but obviously if you don't meet some of the requirements, you're not going to be doing very well. Another requirement is to have a market study, a housing assessment, or a developer market review as an attachment to your application items. And the intent is very likely to show what the need is and the need that they might be serving as to why some support to help make the project happen would be something that the state should consider. Some of the financial highlights about the program, they do have a minimum number of units that would be required for a project. It depends on the type of project. So if it's a single family type of development, you have to have 4 or more units. If it's multifamily, it's 3 or more. And if it's upper story housing, 2 or more. The state tax credit is 10% of the first $150,000 of new investment per unit. And there is a cap on that. The maximum award for a project is $1 million. And then they have a cost cap per unit for single family. These numbers that I have listed here are for urban communities because it's different in a small community, a different number. But for single family, $298,000, a little bit over that. And for multifamily, a little bit over $241,000. And then that credit is earned when the unit is certified for occupancy. So it's not when you issue the building permit or at the time they apply. It would be that they completed the project and it's available as housing and starting to create some property tax. We have had some applications. Shane and I were talking about this earlier and said, what were some of the recent applications? Urban Flats in 2015 applied through this program. River Place applied in 2019. And then last year, a project on College Street applied. I don't know offhand if all of those got awarded. I know the last one is reapplying this year, and I was going to go through that. So they did not get awarded last year. So I mentioned that we have heard about a couple potential projects, and so that was kind of the why we were in front of council to talk about it. The project specifics, I'm just going to go over kind of high level, not really into a lot of details. One project that we've heard some interest from the developer of possibly applying through this program is in the downtown area, the development referred to as the Cottage Courts at 9th and Clay. These are images of the potential development. And then I have a map there locating it that shows then where the urban renewal district boundaries are and would show that this particular property is not in the urban renewal district. And so what we have heard is the potential that there might be a request to council of the $1,000 a unit, that minimum requirement by the state for the city to provide support, because there is no other way that they could show city support. The next project I mentioned, 2119 College Street, had a site plan that was approved in June of 2019, so it's a ways back. So I put up the images from that site plan just to remind you about the potential building and how the site was going to lay out there. This project, in contrast to the other one, is within an urban renewal district, and so they could use the tax abatement that's available to them to show their city support for the project, and they would not have to ask for something like the last project that I mentioned. So that's another thing, is just to highlight how unique some of these projects are and why the funding request might be slightly different, is because of the circumstances of the location and the type of development. The other site that we've heard potentially might be looking to apply is in the Green Hill Village area. It would be just to the south of the new Casey's and the Wash Bar, I believe it's called, there on Green Hill Road. And while we have not reviewed a site plan through any review process with the Planning and Zoning Commission or City Council, we have talked with the developer a number of times about a concept, and this is some of the types of units that they would plan to build here are similar to a project in Tiffin, Iowa that they are working on. This also is not in an urban renewal district, and so in other communities, the developers conveyed that they've obtained a tax rebate on somewhere between 50 to 100% of the taxable value for 10 years, abated annually. That's been a common approach that they've seen in other communities. Again, all these projects really vary. So with that, staff is looking to hear the council's interest in supporting the projects that we hear might be wanting to apply, so that we know how to guide them. Should we bring them through for a council resolution, or is the council not interested in supporting any project and meeting some of the state requirements to do that? So we just need to hear the council's temperature, understanding this might be kind of a new thing to the council, so that we wanted to go through that.
All right, I'm going to just start real quick, and I'll be brief. I'm definitely interested in supporting any projects, but it would be based upon all the details, unfortunately. I don't want to stifle anything, but I think if there was a way to get, here's what is definitely coming down the line, and here's what their ask is, an ask of monetary support is much different than an ask of other types of support. So it just depends. But I'm definitely interested in seeing all the applications personally.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Councilmember Ganfield.
Thank you, sir. Stephanie, on slide, that looks like maybe page 4 in your slide deck, but the requirements on the market study, housing needs assessment, developer market review, are those or as a submission, or do they need to have all of those?
I take it to be or, like you said.
Okay. So previously, some of these have been approved with the developer's own market review, but we have a forthcoming housing assessment that would help with this. And I would assume that we would then want to approve that to be part of this if we decide to support these applicants, correct?
That's correct. We understand that housing needs assessment could fulfill this requirement.
Okay. And we've laid a lot of groundwork there, and there's a private-public partnership in that. So I think I'd be in favor of this as well, again, contingent upon the details of each applicant's project.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Councilmember.
I have a question. It says here, requires local match of $1,000 per unit minimum. Is that by the city?
Yes. Okay. And that's why I was going through that there could be different ways that can happen. If you're in a TIF district, or the project is, well, then usually there's probably some type of tax abatement agreement already, and that can count toward that. Where a project that is not, well, then...
That's where a city helps fund a private developer. Yeah, I'm not for that. Okay, thank you.
I echo Councilman Harding if you need to take that temperature. So I'm always open to hearing how we can make development happen. So
So just to clarify, the local match has to be the city, so it's a city match. I interpret it as a local match by someone local, whether a developer or not. But just for clarification, if it's in a TIF district, the tax incentives that we offer in abatement count as the match.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Two of these areas are not in those areas, and so I echo Dave. I say no.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Part of the TIF districts is not only the tax abatement, but it's the money that comes in. And we take 10% away from the county. I'm actually looking to go ahead. This is going to be let me just finish about one sentence. I want to sunset some of these because of that reason. That's it.
All right. I just don't want to get in. I understand.
Nope, I understand.
Yep. All right. So really quickly, is there a creative way that you guys have thought about how we would go about the $1,000 match since we're under such a tight budget when they're not in a TIF district?
So if you recall, some of the council members were on the council a number of years ago, and there was monies that were set aside in the economic development and Shane's budget with regard to, I think it was about $150,000 a year. And at that time, the question was, what would that be used for? And there was a number of, hey, how would we, there's just things that come up economic development-wise. And so this is one of those things. If you look at the one that was in the downtown area, they're looking at 12 units. That would be about $12,000 with over what did we figure out? That was going to be about a $3.6 million investment in the downtown for $12,000. So anyway, those are we have thought about some of those, and as each of those come forward, we would outline what potentially is the funding source, what the agreement is, all of those things.
Okay. I can understand the argument of not, the city staying out of private development, but private-public partnership can really help our tax base grow. And I would be open to looking at it if we're going to get a $3.6 million entity that's going to add to our tax base, and we can invest $12,000 of economic development funds that we already budget for every year out of Shane's thing, then I would be open to looking at it 100% because it's all about what do we get for what we spend. And if we're going to get a large entity downtown that's going to provide taxes, we're looking for revenue. So I'm open to it. Councilmember Cruz?
Thank you. I guess my thoughts go to actually some of the arguments I've read about TIFs or not having a TIF, which, it's a tax credit program. These projects will probably be built anyway, so we're just giving additional money to a private developer for a project you're going to do anyway.
Maybe, maybe not.
So I'm leaning towards the no side, but open to looking at details. So that's how I'm looking at it right now.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
Just the last thing to clarify, I guess, are you looking for any action from us tonight, or just an informational, or just trying to get the pulse? Because I think each of these is going to come for a resolution of support as well as a decision upon any local match. So it's going to come before us as a council again.
The details of each project would come before you, but the developers are asking, what's the council's interest? And that's what we're trying to gauge here. Should some of them spend the time on an application and spend the time to try to go through the process, or should they consider whether they're going to do the project or what they're going to do?
So would you like to hear a motion to entertain these applicants?
I wasn't prompting for a motion. I guess it was more just to hear, based on the information that you've learned, would you be possibly willing to support a project?
I don't think we need
to
a
keep
motion
forward?
based off of what they've heard each individual say. I would say to Councilmember Cruz's point that I don't think we can guarantee these are going to be built. One of those site plans was approved a while ago, 2019, and there's no motion to build on it. And now that one's in a TIF district, so it actually is easier from this application standpoint. But developing is not cheap. It's not easy, and that's 4 years ago now that it was approved. So I wouldn't say that any of these sites are guaranteed, and we're just going to give $12,000 on a $3.46 million investment it's not that much, what we get out of it. So I don't know that it's necessarily, yes, it's going to be built. They could say, no, I'm just going to sell the land and get out. So it's always a possibility. Yes, Councilmember Cruz.
It's hard to shape my response here, but I had a question, and I know you probably said this in the beginning. These are automatic if they're an urban renewal. I mean, they get them, or they apply for them to get qualified, and then somebody in Des Moines or somewhere approves it?
It's not automatic if they're an urban renewal. What I was pointing out is it's just easier to provide the local match part of it because the TIF dollars can support that. And we already have a policy of how we're generally supporting projects. So it's a little bit more known that they could match that dollars with state dollars and bring a successful application forward.
Then is the hill higher to climb if they're not in an urban renewal, would you say, in the process of approval in Des Moines?
I'm not sure if any of the state criteria is about whether it's in an urban renewal or not. Like I said, eligible projects are brownfield sites, which may be urban renewal too, because there's cross purposes, it's the same types of purposes there, but not necessarily.
Any other
thanks.
statements? Because we need to wrap it up. All right. Well, then I will call this meeting to adjournment.
All right, thank you, sir.
Will there be a 10-minute delay before the council meeting?
As quick as possible, I'd say 7 minutes. 6:15 or 7:15.